you stick around, we are going to have a little sort of wrap-up session now, and then we're going to open the gates and see if any of the panelists and attendees would like to liven up their mics and join us for a bit of serendipity, a bit of networking and chatting, which has been so difficult for the last year, and I'm missing it. So with that, I'm going to need a glass of water. I'm going to ask Eric to take the reins for a second, because we have just the final closing fireside chat with those faces that you're probably sick of. Well, mine you probably are, but of course the beautiful Eric, Mark, and Tim can, and I think JT is going to join us as well, have got their lipstick on and their makeup done, and we're going to have a wrap-up session. Eric, are you there?
I'm here.
Excellent.
Everyone else is here.
Cool.
Yes.
You're here. We're all here.
You can ask the questions now.
What an incredible day. My gosh. I'm so glad that Steve Nathans Kelly, who, by the way, deserves a huge shout out for manning this whole thing and making panelists into panelists and demoting and promoting and all that stuff going on behind the scenes. I mean, it's just Zoom, but it's still.
Put the camera on, Steve. Give us a wave.
Come on, Steve.
Give us a wave.
No, he's not going to do anything.
That's right at the moment. He's like, I'm
Oh, there he is.
There he is.
There he is.
Where is he? I can't see him. We're going to have to.
Yeah, turn on gallery view.
He's not going to spotlight himself. There we go.
Steve is
There he is.
It's the man who actually made it.
So how long did the dog make it through all the sessions today before he decided?
Yeah, he's coming back in.
Okay. All right. He was just waiting for the closing part, I think.
Exactly. So I would like to start by going back to the beginning of the day. Let's put our scuba diving gear on, swim to the bottom of the ocean, and go back to, I mean, Elsa kind of came out, guns a-blazing this morning. And I don't know if Elsa's still here.
I don't think she is, unfortunately.
But I mean, she painted a picture of a world in which hardware and manpower, human power, are in desperately short supply. And if you're talking about building networks, physical networks, things you can actually touch, we're in big trouble. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on,
I don't think it was just Elsa. There was somebody else in that panel.
It was Elsa, and it was Andy Bax from Seaborn.
Yeah.
And Gil Santalese from NJFX.
Well, and I'm saying they all essentially were saying, look, if you want to do something in the next 6 months, you're not going to get there with the amount of hardware back orders. So that's actually really fascinating, because we just assume we can scale without really having to do planning beyond capacity planning. And this is, I guess it may be a byproduct of some of the chip shortage that, we're seeing across the board, but yeah, it really was quite fascinating.
JT, Mark, any of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I had the same. I mean, I took it a little further in terms of the core IP session I had, where even routing, BGP, which is a fundamental part of the internet, is still basically not working as we should, not as optimal as we could. And those are basically, I mean, similar with the data centers and whatever. These two are fundamental elements of what we have today. So we still have a lot of work to do apart from what we will do on the edge, but back to the core, there's still a lot of work to do there.
It takes me back to Dave Crowley and the conversation I had with him 2018. What do you think the scaling challenges are? And it's power. And it's just so easy to assume that the internet is magic and it's just always going to infinitely grow and be abundant, because it's done some amazing things in certain territories, but there's so much of the world left to build out. There really is. 80 million users in a year in China. I mean, that's just gobsmacking growth. That's really, really amazing.
Mark, you mentioned the BGP and things like that are still out there functioning, as you say, not optimal. I think a lot of what we're dealing with, remember, we've still got a decent amount of MPEG-2 TS out there as well. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with protocols that are 35, 40 years old, even with WebRTC, as fancy as it sounds. Underlying RTP, SIP, a bunch of the things that telephony have seen. And I think one of the points that was made that was really well made was when a new protocol comes out, and I think this may have been made, Dom, during our fireside chat with with Akamai. When a new protocol comes out, we have to measure it not just for what it does in terms of the performance of what we can do from a throughput standpoint, but also how does it affect the legacy and how does it affect things like power consumption?
I remember we were talking on SM Advanced Forum just a couple of weeks ago about codec innovations and so on, and looking at, there's this sort of concept that AV1 comes out, H.264 gets turned off. I just don't think that's true. I think what happens is AV1 comes out and we've still got to support H.264 ad infinitum. People keep telling me
the legacy doesn't die, basically. Yeah. That's a problem.
And that's in a formaldehyde. People keep telling me RTMP's dead, and it's never going to die, not as a contribution technology.
Well, Flash is dead, but RTP is not.
Yeah, sure. Client-side technologies get churned out when you throw out a laptop, but what's going on in the core infrastructure and the core networks? These
Correct.
things. SRT is not offering significant enough advantages to cause a complete replacement for RTMP. And I think these things that we have to bear in mind, that these things only grow.
But I think that will also add complexity to everything that we're doing. Even though we push everything to the edge and all the new stuff, whatever, we still have to support the old stuff as well.
Right.
That isn't as easily pushed to the edge as we think it might be.
Yeah, so doing RTMP in a serverless compute environment.
JT? Quiet. It's like, JT, I know you have an opinion.
Where am I? Am I on camera?
You're on Zoom, dude. You're on Zoom still. We've been there all year.
Yeah, none of it. Sorry, none of this is new. We've been having these discussions for 20 years. Oh, we can't get our hardware we need. Okay, we got to have a longer lead time. Oh, 6 months isn't enough. Well, let's do 8. Oh, there's a memory shortage. Uh-oh. Like, this isn't new. I mean, yeah, our RTMP is still out there because people are using it and legacy systems are built on it. Dude, they're still using like COBOL systems in banking.
Correct.
Like the stuff, it doesn't go away because people don't switch it over. It takes years. Look how long it's taking broadcast to move from QAM and SDI to IP. Like mind blowing, like 40 years, and still they're not migrated. So yeah,
just like the question that Don we had on LinkedIn with the Darwin streaming server question that came up. Like, yeah, we need some help with Darwin streaming server. Like, I mean, that's like ancient, basically, right?
And Mark,
Helix server, I've got one running. I can't troubleshoot it. And you're like, I'm sorry, you can't what? Like what? No, that's what happens. And so when we talk about new protocols, new packages, new codecs, like all the streaming operators, all the MNOs, they're looking at it as like, okay, how do I bifurcate my workflow? Because I have to support the old stuff, but I want the new stuff. And then eventually I'll transition over, but it'll be like 15 years later. So it's just, to Mark's point, everything is super complicated as we introduce new stuff. It's not let's get rid of the old thing, replace it with the new thing. I mean, like Don, you just said, it's really not that much better than RTMP, but to be honest, HESP is. HESP is fantastic contribution protocol, but it's not going to replace everything overnight. Like and by the time people are replacing things, something new is going to come up and they're going to be like, no, that's the good, we need to use that. Yeah, so we've been having these conversations for, 15, 20, 30, they're just going to keep happening. It's a cycle.
I think the transition to the internet's also different because the internet is a long-running formaldehyde, where traditional networks, somebody who was running a particular type of broadcast network that was tied to a bunch of set-top boxes, they'd eventually get bored of it and want to upgrade, so they'd turn the old one off. Whereas in the internet, you can't really go back and tell everybody on the internet who's doing something, right, you can't do it anymore, you're going to have to do it a new way. And that's one of the sort of...
It needs to go replace their router to get rid of BGP. I'm sorry, what did you get? I'm going to go smoke stuff. I'll be back later.
I have to check in the chat room's coming alive, and there are some people in there, Indra and Dave.
Let me just say this real quick, JT, because we were talking about broadcast. The other day when I'm sorting through stuff still, because, after I got married and moved, I'm unpacking stuff, I found my two $40 converter cards that the government sent me to pay for a converter. And I went to see if one of them worked at bestbuy.com. It turns out I'm like 10 years late for actually getting that over stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly. We find all this old technology. Does it still work? And then some of it you do plug in. You're like, oh my God, this still works. I mean, but look at like ATSC 3.0. That's another thing, right? Hey, that's fantastic. Like some of it's that's really cool. It sounds like it's going to be a hub and spoke kind of thing with streaming. You got to replace all the TVs. Like, it's mind blowing. Look at 5G. You got to replace all the phones with new radios. Like, I mean, it's crazy. So we're going to constantly have a world in streaming. There's always things going to be running in parallel, especially when you start talking about like monitoring. And I know Brenton's on this, and he's going to be going like, "Hey, JT's talking about monitoring," because you can't like you're running a business. You can't like turn off the other thing that was delivering using the old systems because you have paying customers. So you got to monitor it, and you got to monitor the new thing, and you got to run them in parallel, and you got to see how the transition works. And it's just, I mean, sometimes it's like whack-a-mole. It's like, you know, I'm sometimes daunted by the complexity of what the system is becoming when what we want it to do and getting out to the edge has become simpler and easier. Yes, in theory, just not in practice.
But in the end, it's just a business decision, right? Because that's ultimately work. It's not even a technology decision; it's a business decision.
I think as we move into this kind of infrastructure as a service environment and platforms as a service environment, it doesn't really cost you that much to sustain one customer who wants one service. It's not the same as having to run a platform that's globally available for everybody just to support one last customer. You know, these things are, these services are increasingly, it's increasingly possible to just run the service when it's needed for that one customer and then turn it off again. So it's going to be there forever in some ways.
So Theory's raised his hand. I suppose.
Yes.
Come on. Let's have it.
Sorry guys, you're touching one of my hot buttons. Yes.
Dimension.
Yes.
Which of the hot buttons, Theory?
Can you see me? No, it's about this legacy thing, and I don't know if some of you have listened to our live stream session on the compression, and I was making a point which was, I think, caught by many people, the fact that yes, you have a lot of legacy device, and guess what? Those H.264 legacy device, because there are billions, they are the one consuming the more bandwidth. So you have all those geeks from the GAFAs trying to sell you the AV1 story. And then when you look at the traffic, who is consuming the traffic is the good old H.264, who are not going to disappear. So we can always debate if there will be at some time a transition, and maybe not to AV1, maybe more to HEVC. But at the end of the day, where we spend our time is to optimize the old device, because this is where the traffic is. And we cannot say we are switching to a new codec, everything is going to improve. This is not true. You need to optimize the legacy, because this is where the traffic is, unless you decide, like Apple, to switch off H.264 and do only an HEVC service. But how many operators are using new codecs? So I thought it was a provoking thoughts.
I'm going to chip in there, and I think this is why I'm pushing sustainability as a central theme at CDS here today, and I'm delighted with that session. I think the big innovation ground in the content delivery space over the next 5 to 10 years is all going to be about sustainability. It's going to be about doing exactly the same thing more efficiently, and not in terms of money, not in terms of performance, but in terms of power utilization. I think there's going to be increasing regulatory, increasing social pressure, and I think it's going to drive a huge amount of innovation. So that's my take.
And I would add to that too, Dom, that one of the things that came out in our Fireside chat too was that the reusing of technology. So it's not just it's end of life for what we need for this particular codec or this particular format, we're going to toss it in the trash. It's what can we do with those FPGAs? What can we do with that general purpose computing to, you know, repurpose that into something else, which I think is important.
So listen, sorry, can I just cut across? Eric, you're running this session. Ask a couple more questions from us. I'm going to throw it back to you. That's my question.
No, I mean, you're already jumping into all.
No, we're taking control. We shouldn't do that. It's your session.
No, you should. You should. And you know what? I love the fact that Indra and others are very active in the chat right now with questions, either, you know, directly to JT. And Steve Nathans-Kelly has taken the dangerous step of giving everyone, including all attendees, the permission to speak.
Well, since Theory spoke up, Since Theory spoke up from Harmonic, I want to say, Theory, there's a report where we are working to release with you at Harmonic on the state of streaming that we would love to push out the door as quickly as we can, because I think it goes to some of the points that you're actually talking about as well.
Yeah. But beware, you might be talking to people from a different religion inside Harmonic. So that's also risky.
I'm religious, so all right.
So
But it's a good subject, and we should never forget the legacy. I keep pushing that to the GAFA people who tell me, no, we have to work on new stuff. Where's the traffic of your new stuff?
So listen, guys, I've got the can open. Okay, it is officially, we're at the bar after the conference. We've got the mics. We've got permission for people to turn their mics on and join the chat and turn their videos on. And I'd love to see people. We haven't had a chance to do this for ages.
I would say if people do want to turn your cameras on, by all means. If you do want to speak, please raise your hand. Otherwise, it's chaos. We tried that once. Yeah. And it turned into a nightmare. But
so listen, Eric's the boss. Let's wait for Eric to cue people in and out and so on. So.
Well, I'm going to back up while we're waiting. I'm going to back up to something Indra posted just a few moments ago, which is she asked questions about skill shortage. Any thoughts on how education at the K-12 level can be overhauled to better meet the skill sets needed in the 21st century? I mean, I know that's kind of outside the scope of what we typically talk about here on Content Delivery Summit, but I think it's worth considering.
Isn't that the push to STEM right now? Well, and I would say STEAM, but
STEAM, yeah.
Everyone's on that bandwagon, right? So I think in 15 years we're going to have like an overabundance of kids who are programmers. It's going to be like, whoa, we can't find jobs as a coder. They're just not. They're all filled. I think that is being addressed. I know that from the SBA perspective, we're looking at launching a university, and so hopefully we'll be able to at some point provide some K through 12 curriculum that we can give to teachers about, really about focusing on streaming and network development and network architecture and things like that. But yeah, the answer to to Indra's question is yes. We need to focus in on that age group to get them interested enough to say like, I want to go to college to build the next generation network, or I want to improve on codecs. And of course that child will be ridiculed from ages 12 to 18, but they'll get in college and they'll be like a hero. So yeah, I think some of it's being addressed in terms of just the focus on technology, but there needs to be more done to focus in on like what's applicable to our industry.
And there's still a fundamental problem that COVID laid bare with the fact that I can go 4 miles from my house and have kids who do not have internet, cannot get internet based on where they live. And my wife is a math teacher, still had to print out photocopies of stuff for the kids to come to school to get. So rural broadband in America, and I'm just speaking to America because I know it's the same across the world. Rural broadband in America, if we're going to fix education, we have to fix that accessibility issue.
5G will do it. 5G ultra wideband will do it. It's just going to take time.
Okay. How much time do you think it's going to take, JT?
Like if you've done any testing, so 5G, basically 5G over LTE is awful. 5G ultra wideband takes millimeter wave technology, takes a saturation of picocells. It's going to take, like probably 10 years, 15 years, maybe even more to push that into rural, because you're talking about, really spanning 5G networks, right? From a major metro market to a rural area to another rural area, and then saturating that place with all the picocells. It's just going to take time.
There's also a spectrum.
There's also low orbit satellites now, right? So that's also still an alternative that could be looked at.
There's on Elon Musk's venture have come back as.
So maybe I can give you some lighting on the French regulator. French regulator has said to ISP by 2023 or 24, you shall provide 30 megabits to every people. But I'll let you decide which technology you can use. Can be fiber, can be 5G, can be fixed wireless, whatever. And if you don't deliver at that rate, you get penalties. I'm telling you, Based
It
on
works.
this policy, you will see a lot of broadband coverage because you guys need to cost them a lot of money.
I think there's also a big, there's a big unspoken secret about 5G, which is, yes, it offers all this amazing benefit if you get the spectrum licensing, but at the spectrums that are being licensed today, it offers almost no benefit over 4G in terms of ubiquity and reach. You know, all these performance characteristics.
I think it's a 10% or something, right? 10%, 20%, that's it.
All the real benefits that are being promoted are all up at 60 gigahertz, which are all completely reserved for military and astrophysics at the moment. It's just not possible to get those other than in very small, localized sort of industrial applications in a factory. It's not a widespread technology in any way. It's, don't get me started. 5G is just they should have invested in 4G. They should push 4G out to everyone. 5G is just a complete distraction.
I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I will run across 5G ultra wideband on occasion. It's not everywhere. And I'll do a quick fast dot contest, and it is 300, 400, 500 megabits per second. It is phenomenal. Like, it's like, oh my God, this is what the internet's supposed to be.
Sure,
and I think with
the mast,
what's that?
If you're standing under the mast,
no,
but you try and get 600 meters away from the mast. Try and get 600 meters away from the mast, and it just peters out. It's saturation. It's just
5G ultra wideband, the millimeter wave technology is a mesh network, right? So you have to have that mesh, which requires the saturation of cells. That's the issue. So you have to have towers and picocells, and they've all got to be working in concert. And so that's what takes so long. That's why arenas are all adopting it, because they're like, hey, we're a closed ecosystem. We don't have to deal with townships. Put all the stuff in here. People will come in, and it will be a mega awesome mobile experience. They can AR and VR and all this crap. But it's not real world, right? It's a closed environment. But you're seeing that happen in some cities, like Las Vegas is saturating with 5G ultra wideband because they want to enable betting. Like, so you're going to be walking around watching a video going, I can bet, I can bet, I can bet. It's going to happen. It's just going to take a long time.
You know, 5 times the power, 5 times the investment, when they could have actually spent a fifth of that and actually got 4G out to everyone.
Although the latency and the slicing that you can do is you can't do that on 4G. You can do it on 5G. That's different.
They're niche applications like betting. The ubiquity of access for education, for all these important things should have been done for 4G and rolled out properly before we started wasting the money on 5G.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well,
you know what,
Tom, but Tom, that would not have allowed the government to do another spectrum auction. If we stuck with 4G, there wouldn't be much, you know, and fundamentally, I think this goes back to the how do we support the legacy? Because, you know, we've got a decent amount of 3G as well. Obviously, you've got people who can't consume the kind of media that we're talking about.
Sorry, Dave in the chat, like it. Where is he? Bring him on mic. That's awesome.
I was going to say, I mean, although Dave, is he 69 right now? Or, you know, there's no relative data point there, Dave.
I mean, the long and short of it is, you know, we all just, as a society, as a civilization, whatever you want to call it, we all just need to realize what needs to be done. And what needs to be done is getting broadband access to everyone so that no longer becomes an issue of have and have nots, right? Everyone has access to the information, to the training, to the abilities, you know, to get things that they need. That needs to happen. And unfortunately it's not, right? It's, you know, it's capitalism drives everything, money greases the wheels. It's unfortunate, right? And I think we all look back and we say, like, we can be better as human beings, but we're, you know, unfortunately we're not. So yeah, maybe we will get it right by 7G. But it's, you know, we need that, to all your points, in order to push our industry forward and to get the people we need. We need those kids to be educated, and to do so, you know, to Tim's point, everyone needs access.
Sorry, and I don't have my bifocals on, so I read Dave's thing as maybe we'll get it when I'm 70. That's why I said, is he 69 now? Now it makes sense. 7G as opposed to 7D. All right.
I want to cut in with something. I want to make an apology in my programming. One of the problems I had as I looked at the program last week is the gender balance. It's just not happened this year. I did really try to get more female speakers to join, and we had, I feel, a disappointingly low number of speakers. I think that's partly how we approached the session. We spoke to companies, and companies put people forward, where historically, when we've addressed the gender balance, I've actually specifically approached female speakers that I know, and so on. And even with the support, even with the sort of interaction we've had through SMAF and streaming media with the Women in Streaming Media group and so on, it's still worryingly low representation, and we need as an industry to work much harder to promote that, because there's 50% of the population who are going to bring excellence to our industry, and we need to work harder to bring them forward. So please help us network, help us find speakers from the other side of the table, because we need them.
And step up to be mentors to younger female engineers and that kind of thing in the industry as well. I think that's key to make sure that the industry grows.
You know, it's interesting. This year was the first time ever that when I was reaching out to speakers, a speaker from a very large company that I won't name, but it begins with an N, asked me explicitly, what is your conference's diversity policy? What is your commitment to bringing diverse speakers? And we need to see more of that as well. And we all have to hold ourselves to account, but it's also important that that things are addressed from a policy level, corporate policy, and just as you know, JT and Dom have both said, it's being better human beings, right? And yes, you're right, Dom. You know, you get 5G is great for niche applications like latency, but you know, even, you know, it's hard not to, I mean, this is what everyone in the industry does, right? We focus on things like open caching and edge compute, but it seems like some of the fundamental problems still haven't been addressed. Not that it's necessarily up to, well, I of course come at it from a video perspective, right? And JT does as well. It's the Streaming Video Alliance. So we focus on what can be done with video, beginning after the point that actually really needs to fundamentally be addressed underneath that. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
But if you look at, I mean, if you look at it from a gaming perspective, right? I mean, video. If you look at video and gaming, video versus gaming, the gaming industry is extremely big as well. Don't forget that how big that is and how much traffic that actually uses of all. It's in comparison to what we're doing on the video side.
True. Hey, Jeffrey Gilbert raised his hand.
Right, I saw a hand here.
Jeffrey, you should be able to turn your own camera on. I'm not seeing.
I feel we
Jeffrey,
should invite Andre
you can turn on your camera.
Fantastic.
There he is.
Jeffrey, there you are.
Hey, Jeffrey.
You're on mute.
I think your mic on your computer is not on, because you're not muted in Zoom. But
all right, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
To avoid accidentally speaking, I have double mute going on, one on my mic and one on my screen. I figure that's better than not being able to be heard. But look, the raised hand was actually a user error. It wasn't intentional. But I appreciate you promoting me. And I will take this moment to say the conversation actually today, I've turned into a couple of sessions, not the whole day, but it actually was, I think, very well done. So kudos to everyone that participated.
And Jeffrey, you win the prize every time we do one of these. We get somebody who accidentally hits raise hand. So just
I lowered my hand somewhat shortly thereafter, but
sorry, I
got promoted.
I saw your hand.
Listen, I'm really keen to invite Indra in. Indra, can we bring you onto the mic and onto the camera? I'm going to click the ask to unmute button, because you've been asking stunning questions.
Why are we on camera?
Indra, please turn on your camera and mic.
And I see who else is good?
And Jeffrey, we hadn't seen a guitar all day, so I really appreciate that.
Hey, I got mine right there.
Every good Zoom session must have a guitar in it.
Oh, there's your, okay, there's there.
I got mine too.
If you guys see my guitar, it's probably the only Fender Webcaster in the world. It's true. You don't believe me? I'm going to have to go and get it.
For once, we're all speechless.
Wow.
Hey.
that.
All right, Dom, you
Did
got to
you
say
have that
what's up on
custom
screen.
engraved?
Can you read that?
Yeah, barely.
The Fender webcaster made by me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hilarious.
So Eric, any other quick questions for us?
You know, I think in your own roundabout, twisted way, you've addressed most of the things that I had to bring up. You know, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the sustainability initiatives. You know, you brought up earlier, Tim, in the chat about some things we could learn from, or smaller companies might be able to learn from some of the larger companies out there. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that from a sustainability standpoint, especially when you get a big company, you know, it because you're dealing with multiple stakeholders, you're sort of pushed in multiple directions. So you have an initiative around one particular thing. ESG happens to be a big thing at the moment. But I think from a small company standpoint, thinking about how your product is used by larger companies, and then what happens to that product after the fact. I think we so often think about, oh, I can make this sale, but we don't think about the longer term environmental and sustainability impact of that. Dom, do you have any other sort of thoughts along those lines, big companies versus small?
Sorry, say the question again. I was just typing back to the chat room.
No, I know you were talking about Colleen Henry, and I think she'd be a great invite. So Eric was asking about sort of, I had mentioned that small companies can learn from the bigger ones from the sustainability standpoint. And I was saying that you know, one of the things with small companies is we're so often focused on making the sale that we don't think about what the long-term environmental or sustainability impact is of, say, a hardware product that we sell into a big company. Figuring that that's a problem they're going to have to deal with as opposed to a problem we're going to have to deal with. You know, I've seen some companies in the space, and I'll go back and show my age, but DigiDesign, which was a company who made Pro Tools, which was a digital audio system, did a really good job. And NewTek has done it with the TriCaster. If you want to trade up to the next one, they'll take your product back, they'll refurb it, and then they'll sell it on to the next person at a reduced price. So it doesn't end up as e-waste. It doesn't end up, you know, sort of causing a, what do we do with this device once it's done?
As I say, I think sustainability as a whole is going to be a key issue. I think small companies are going to be able to make incredible differences at scale, and I think the opportunities for small companies are dominantly going to be in sustainability over the next 5 years. The big companies are going to make big waves with codec. The small step changes in the codecs, the small step changes in the latency and so on, but you need to be really at scale to do that. But the small companies who really can't get the capital to do the intense maths effectively that you need to do to innovate in the codec space are going to be able to make small changes to hardware architectures that are going to make, you know, petawatts of difference to power and make it much easier for cable landing stations to be built, because suddenly they take a step change down in the power requirements, or data centers to suddenly become much more efficient because they need much less cooling and so on. So I think small companies need to be focused on where they're competing. I think I'm wholeheartedly behind the sustainability side of things, and I think I look forward to hopefully cultivating some interest in greening of streaming and getting that conversation going.
Mark, you had a couple other thoughts that you had posted up in our chat group about sort of overarching themes for the day. What were one or two of those?
Yeah, so for me, data and measurement. So that came up a couple times in different sessions. So by QoS, measuring difference between edge and client, etc. So there's still data hunger, I guess, and knowing to know more to improve quality in general, because I think that's the main driver. That's what Disney said, etc. They all say the same thing: quality, quality, quality. So they want to measure for quality or to be more efficient in what they're doing. I think that a couple of times with different sessions, I've heard the same type of questions basically.
I think there's still a lot of work to be done on measurement side.
And it was interesting what PC from Hulu asked of Igor from my panel, how does multi-CDN affect your ability to actually gather the analytics? And I think that's important, because at the end of the day, if you have a really good measurement system on one CDN, but you have a limited measurement or insight into another CDN, you're effectively saying, I can give you feedback over here, but I can't give you feedback across the entire space.
Well, you can only compare with the lowest denominator. So that's your bottom line. So if there's some standard about, and we get the lowest denominator up in general, whether this is based on standards or whatever agreement that there is, then in the end, everybody will benefit from this in terms of quality, as long as you're at least. But again, there is no open. No, there's no standardization around it. There's no discussions around. Everybody builds their own tools in the end.
Although it was interesting to hear both Brenton and several of the other panelists say that the QOE working group, I guess, JT, that's one of the SVA initiatives, is trying to address some of that, because obviously the expectation should have the same quality of experience across multiple CDNs. And to what you're starting to get ready to do with CDNs as well, I think that is
just in the same direction. Yeah, it's in the same direction. Yeah, I think there's a need, and some people said it already. There needs to be a little bit more standardization to get the whole industry a level up in terms of, at least in terms of CDNs. And I look at it more not only from a media perspective, but from the whole CDN spectrum. So also security, also edge, also bit delivery, acceleration. The whole spectrum, not just media, but in general, there needs to be more agreement on certain things, and that's not still
well, that's been the tension in our industry from the beginning, hasn't it? Is that if we're going to compete with broadcast or replace broadcast, every time I sit through one of these content delivery summits, I think to myself, see, that reminds me of why broadcast has settled on things and stuck with it for 40 years. Right? But
I'm pretty sure in 40 years to say the same thing about us in streaming media, maybe.
Well, but not if we don't agree on some standards. Because, and JT, you've written about this for streaming media, that there need to be, you use the rail track gauge example, right? There needs to be some basic agreed upon standards on which things are built or which things need to conform to. That's innovation, because that's, you look at all these incremental improvements in codecs that so many companies in our space are chasing. There's a ripple effect when that happens, and when we try to chase after those incremental improvements.
Yeah. I mean, and standards are tough, right? So, the thing about broadcast, those standards are mandated by governments, right? So if you want to, broadcast operations, you're going to use these SMPTE standards and these SCUDI standards. I mean, it is what it is. That makes it easy, but it makes it very inflexible. And so when you look at streaming, I think the idea is we don't it's too hard to implement standards right now. I know CTA Wave is in that direction, but and BSF. But at the Alliance, we focus on best practice because the technology is moving too fast. By the time you get a standard, which is 3 years, the technology is already gone. It's already moved past it. So now you're talking about implementing an inflexible solution that doesn't meet the current business requirements. So there's a delicate balance. Yes, you want the industry to agree on A, what the challenges are, B, how you talk about them, and C, some collaborative solution that everyone agrees yeah, that's the best way to do this. I'm on board with that. We'll do it that way. So I think that needs to happen. There needs to be collaboration and agreement, but I don't necessarily think at this point that there needs to be some standards that forces streaming operators or MNOs to adhere to a specific way to deliver video.
It's an interesting one. I want to jump on this real quick. I call it guidelines or guidelines framework, how you want to call it. So not necessarily standard, because they're very fixed, right? But a guidelines framework or whatever, where you have a set of agreement, at least high over, that you use where there's still some flexibility, right? That's what, I talk with a lot of CDNs right now, right? With the new initiative. And basically, my story to them is, all of the CDNs have a certain number of things all the same, right? Some fundamentals are the same. At least agree on the fundamentals. And there needs to be room for innovation. Everybody needs to innovate and be different, because that's exactly how they make their money. Absolutely agree with that one. But there is still stuff on beneath, on the core, where you can do a lot of stuff which is not really different per CDN. It doesn't make them any different or make them more money or whatever. We can agree, make things easier there for everybody in the whole industry if we have some framework for guidelines.
That's not what standards are for, right? Standards are to promote open market, right? It's to allow somebody to come in and build a competitive product to something that's built so that an operator could swap them out without really any issue. Like if I want to get the core functionality, I can change this box with that box from this vendor to that vendor, and they both work because they're on standards. One may have some more features or different features, doesn't matter. The core functionality is I can swap it out. That's really what standards are, right? They are about forced interoperability in order to support a free market economy. That's all they are. I mean, does it make it better for everyone? Yeah, it makes it better for everyone who's setting up a broadcast network. But does it make it better for everyone who's watching TV at home? No, not. That's again, or there's a lot of balancing here that needs to happen.
Right, but the people at home need to know their TV is going to work.
That's all the consumers care about. That's all they care about is streaming. I
just want it to work, and that is part of what. And I'm not endorsing it, but that is part of what government standards did ensure that when you buy a TV and you plug it in, it will work.
So I want to add to both what JT's saying and what Mark's saying, and Dom, if he can, at some point hear us. I know he's occupied with something, but having worked with DOE policy around set-top boxes 10 years ago, what we will have in our industry if we don't self-police, and this is true for the CDNs just as it is for the set-top box manufacturers, we will be told you'll have to hit a certain performance, number of streams per watt. If we self-police to that and start moving ourselves along, that's not about sustainability, that's about efficiency. And I think efficiency is one of those areas that Vinay really hit on quite well. It is hard to innovate that way, but we have to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be regulated down to that particular,
But it's to Mark's point, and it's to my point. Guidelines, right? As long as we can communicate let's use the U.S. as an example. As long as we can communicate to the FCC, we got this covered. Everyone's pretty much doing it this way. We can all guarantee within 1 or 2 percentage points that the performance and so cache hit efficiency, buffering ratio, things like that are within these norms. We're all good. The FCC is going to be like, okay, like that's one less thing we have to police. So good. And that's the point of like the SBA. That's what we're trying to tell people. Come and be involved in the development of these things so that we don't get them forced down on us as an industry. So to your point, Tim, absolutely. We need to self-police. We need to figure out how to do things effectively together, or we're going to get told how to do stuff by, Big Brother or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, speed of change, right? I mean, look 40 years back, broadcast. If you look at the amount of the speed for change at that time versus the speed of change right now, basically, if you now start doing a standard and it takes you 3-4 years to get the standard done, rectified or whatever, there's already something else that is basically already taking over. It really doesn't make sense to put the standard out. So we need to be a lot quicker in getting those things out. And we don't necessarily need them to call them standards. I'm more, just like JT, more for a framework on this rather than a pure standard.
Well, the EC does a really good job of sort of putting those models in place. It would behoove us to pay attention to it here in the States as well. Because obviously what you've got with your digital competition, and a number of other things, that really, those guidelines are things that we in the States tend to ignore. But because CDN is such, and because streaming is such a global industry, we really need to pick not least common denominator on that, but the best common denominator and work toward those.
Yep, I agree. Agree.
There's a question lurking there from Indra, which is with regard to legal functions, any thought on lags? I'm sure what lags is there, where the data privacy protection, IP protection, deployment and maintenance, or potential implications moving forward? I need to know what lags is to get that. Anyone? What's that one about? Might have been pertinent to a comment that was going on a minute ago. Indra, if you're still tuned in, do give us a bit more detail on that question if we haven't answered it. I haven't picked it up. And AV trainer, I did briefly see your camera on, but it looked like you were in a sauna.
He said his iPad's camera is broken.
Oh, right. Okay. There we go.
So,
Yeah. Dom,
That's what I would say when I was in the sauna. Yeah.
yeah, right.
You're Dutch.
So speaking of Dutch and British and US and the like, I know we're all really keen to get back to face-to-face. We've got this model that IBC is playing with. Of course, we've got Streaming Media West potentially in Huntington Beach. Apparently the lights just went off on me. Telling me it's time to go. What are our expectations as to when we actually will hit that in person again? And let's just say on a regional.
Yeah, you're in the dark.
You saw that IBC moved to December.
I'm going to Stream Media West, and I'm going to the IBC.
Are you going to NAB?
Yep.
October,
Okay,
right?
all of them.
So October. October is when you're
for 6 weeks. So, I'm at that point now. I'll still wear a mask in public, and I'll still wear a mask when I'm in stores, but I don't have to worry about A, really contracting, and B, really spreading it. So I'm ready. Let's get back to face-to-face and give it another, to October, another 4 or 5 months, more people will be vaccinated.
So how are you going to deal with quarantining on the way back?
I don't have to quarantine. I have a vaccine card.
Why don't you have to quarantine? You can still be a carrier.
No. The vaccine is both preventative for me getting the disease as well as transmitting.
No, it's not.
Well, I think, okay.
No, so it's not wrong.
okay. Well, we probably don't want to debate the.
But I will say this to Dom's point. I think, JT, one of the things we have to be highly conscious of is different countries or different regions have different rules for the way that
Rules.
those
Yeah.
things play. And so
EU travel to American tourists with vaccine cards starting June 1st. They've already announced that. So we can continue to hide, or we can get vaccinated and start moving forward. And yeah, there'll be booster shots. You're gonna need a booster. You're gonna need a booster every year. Probably gonna need a booster every 6 months, possibly, but
Probably with our flu shots this fall, we'll get a booster.
Yep.
So JT, your thinking is
Dom is staying in his cave forever. Dom's never going anywhere again.
Dom's just going to the beach at IBC. He's not going in the building.
He just hangs out at the beaches.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Dom's okay.
So I'm,
The only thing that changed me in the last year was the kids came home.
All right. Well, I was just curious because I think there is obviously a very pent-up demand for on-demand. As much as we can sit and do this, in the middle of our week and not have to travel a whole lot, fundamentally, I do think we're going to see a big swing back toward that for a period of time. Will it settle in the middle? It seems like from what we did for the report last week, Eric, where we talked about during Stream Media Connect, is there's going to be a bit of a shift heavily back toward in-person, and then it may settle back in because people are comfortable doing this for events that aren't maybe their bread and butter events, so to speak.
I think my feeling about events, I think we'll see an immediate attempt to go back to old normal, and then people will wonder why, because CPD, distance learning, access to information is much easier in the context we've just done today, at which point probably 18 months time, 12 months time, people will start throwing serendipity parties where they just have a sort of a flag speaker who'll speak for 20 minutes at breakfast, and then you'll have 2 days in a hotel getting pissed with each other talking.
But there's no money in that.
No, but there is all the business development opportunity.
But someone has to put that event on.
That's all right.
Really, not if there's if it's just let's all get together and book a hotel in this at the same time, it's going to cost less.
Well, sure, but that so you're talking about peer-to-peer event organizing, basically, right?
Meetup vibe.
Yeah,
I think it's going to absolutely.
I think Dom will do that in a multicast way. Yeah. Pretty sure.
I'll be everywhere at the same time.
So one other point that came up today that I've heard across multiple events now is moving the video production workflow to the cloud. And that could be everything from acquisition comes in through 5G and the live switching is done in the cloud, or it could be raw content is acquired, posted in the cloud, and then pushed into another solution in the cloud for delivery. I think we fundamentally have turned a corner on that as well. And I think that's really compelling because it does bring the question up of, if I don't have to have a $2 million, edit suite, I can do it online. Do I really need to constantly travel to physical locations to do that type of thing? I think that's also something, Dom, on your panel that was talking about sort of production workflows. I think that was a key point as well.
Sorry, typing at the same time as answering your listening to your question there, but sorry, say the question again.
Just say yes, Tim.
I agree, whatever it was, unless it was JT, it's 2 weeks.
I can't wait till our member meetings are face-to-face again. All of our members are like, oh my God, when are we going to do face-to-face again? Have trade shows changed? Maybe, maybe not. Well, time will tell. To Don's point, maybe in 12 months we do have some sort of hybrid. I don't know. I know that I'm looking forward to seeing people face-to-face again and interacting with them, both as colleagues and friends. So Zoom does not take the place of that. It just does. It's a poor substitute.
I think what I really do hope, though, is that now everybody's been switched on to doing these type of webinars and these type of online experiences, that going back to events doesn't mean these stop. I think these need to become much richer. And I've got, I'm almost watching 5 days a week. I'm catching up with webinars specifically on the industry, and they're being well produced and the content's engaging. And I really do hope that people don't see going back to real world events as an excuse to stop this, because this is better. I honestly think this.
I think what you'll see is the big events will be more generic and more about networking, right? I mean, the chats like, let's say the normal chats, right? Like whatever, discussing technology, trends, whatever, all that kind of stuff that you do with a beer. I mean, those are the things you typically don't do in a Zoom meeting. Very simple. That's where you need the physical events for, right? However, I can imagine that as an addition on top, you will have very specialized webinars that focus on very specific topic, which you would not specifically have on such an event. That's where I see the added value.
Yeah.
Eric, how many cool conversations have we had with the mini keg on the beach?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I do half my business on that Friday at the beach every year. That's killing season. But it could be a meetup at a bar.
But you notice that Dom also stays away from the canal when he's at the beach. Just to make sure.
But again, there's a whole spider web of or I don't know, a row of dominoes, that need to come together to make the beach happen for you currently. And so, in discussing last week with one of our speakers, they said, who's a vendor, they said, yeah, we'll go to IBC if we have to, but we've already heard that most of our customers aren't going to be there. And so, there's this chain of money changing hands that leads to the beach being possible in the current model.
It's going to be small. Anyway, I've heard whole fortune is not there even. So.
And that serendipity that Tim likes to talk about doesn't happen when Dom, Tim, Mark, JT, and Eric who already talk a lot and have a shared affinity for certain things. And when we plan to come together, you need that serendipity of a company you've never heard of.
Right.
Yeah.
That just happens to wander by in the only, you know, so there's.
That's why I'm trying to get people off to liven up their cameras and mics on the chat room.
No, it's not happening. Wow.
I mean, there's not people. A lot of people don't like to be on camera. I mean, to be honest, they just don't. Like I don't. When I have meetings last night, if I don't have to be on camera, I'm not on camera.
You know, Eric, I think what's nice about small events like Streaming Media West, you know, A, that's near a real beach as opposed to what we're calling the beach in Amsterdam. And B,
you can still fall in the water.
That's, well, you have to run into the water. Like
you got to go to the pier to fall into the water. Yeah.
Oh, no.
But you get enough of a critical mass of people rather than just the 10 or 12 people that you would tend to hang out with at those particular things. And it also goes to the diversity piece where you may go in and hear a female engineer talk about a topic. One of the people we pulled into SMAF, you know, of course I do the interviews at Streaming East, Streaming West, was a very, very good Cisco and senior engineer who came to do an interview with me. I was so impressed with that I said to Dom, we have to have her on SMAF. So I don't think it takes a lot of people to get to that critical mass for serendipity, but it certainly does take sort of the intentional gathering together.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong. I'm looking forward to JT buying the beers. Don't get me wrong.
there. Mini cake around.
You can come quarantine for 14 days at the farm, and I'll let you drive the machine up the side of the hill if you'd like to. So,
can I take cows too? I mean, I'm down with that. All right, I got a boogie. Bye, everybody.
I think I think it's probably time to wrap, isn't it?
Great session, guys. It's been
terrific.
For those of you that are still tuned in, there's still 37 odd of you tuned in. I just wanted to sort of make one mention. We had one speaker who had to pull out because he, unfortunately, a key figure in the industry for many years, Nathan, I can never pronounce his surname, Rakiborski, who was one of the co-founders of Limelight, passed away last week. So for those of you that didn't know that, I just wanted to sort of stop and bring the tone right down at the end of the day, unfortunately, and just make mention of that, because that was a great loss to the industry. And I just wanted to sort of, as I think about all of us starting to add years in our 20, 21, 25, 30 years in the industry and so on, there's been a few people pass in the industry this year, and I just wanted to sort of reflect on that for a moment and pass my condolences to Nathan's family and so on, and just make mention of that.
I appreciate it. I mean, he was a really good guy and a friend, and it was really sad to hear his passing. So thanks for saying that. You know, the industry didn't just lose a figure, like we lost a good person. So
yeah. And Alex from Millicast as well was another loss. It's been a bit of a year of it, and strange that they weren't COVID, as far as I know.
And the CEO of Thibeault, right?
Yeah, yes, Les Sultan passed away, and that was from COVID complications.
So we need to value our friendships, people. And,
yes, we do.
Even though we compete and we split hairs over our passions and so on, I love the community in this industry, and I felt that when I heard that Nathan had passed. So.
Here.
Anyway, sorry to bring the tone down right at the end of the day, but it's been an absolutely fantastic day, and I think as we come up to it's 11 o'clock here. I don't know what time it is wherever you are, but I'm sure it's, well, for Brenton,
midnight.
Brenton's probably about 6 in the morning or something if he's still online, but it's been an absolutely immense CDS, and I can't thank you all for enough for participation, input. The chat room's been alive. It's been brilliant, and do stay in touch. We'll have to look to Eric for what the news is on the next CDS. And if we get a chance to see you at the beach or in a canal or in the Huntington Beach or wherever it may be,
right,
I look forward to it, and it's been an awesome content delivery summit. Thank you, Eric, for giving me the chance to program it, and thank you, Tim and Mark, for moderating, and Steve, well, thank you for making it happen fundamentally, because it wouldn't have happened without you. and Monica and all the rest of the crew. Joel's lurking, I think. It's been a cracker, and can't think.
Great. Thanks, guys.
All right. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, guys.